So for those of you who are already in here, you can find the CC button on Zoom where you can, if you turn it on, you can have the real-time translation from English to Korean. So you can follow through the session in Korean as well.
안녕하세요. 혹시 자막이 필요하신 분들은 밑에 CC 버튼을 누르셔서 밑에 자막 기능을 활성화하실 수 있으세요?
And for those of you who joined us, if your names are in Korean, it'd be great if you could change them into English.
혹시 참가자 여러분들 성함을 영어로 바꿔주신다면 저희 진행자님이 부르기가 훨씬 편할 것 같아요. 그래서 태종이님, 윤영아님, 서머님 이제 모두 영어로 이름을 바꿔주시면 감사하겠습니다.
We have more people coming in, so let's wait about like a minute or two before we begin.
조금만 더 기다렸다가 시작할게요. 네. 영어 이름이 있으시면 영어 이름으로 바꿔주셔도 좋고, 이제 한국 이름이면 한국 이름을 영자로 바꿔주시면 감사하겠습니다. 자막이 필요하신 분들은 CC 버튼을 누르셔서 자막 기능을 활성화시켜 주시면 돼요.
Thank you so much for your patience. We will be waiting just a bit more minutes for everyone else to join us.
네, 아직 참여자분들이 다 오시지 않으셔서 조금만 더 기다렸다가 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 참여자 여러분들은 이름을 영어 이름으로 바꿔주시면 저희 진행자님이 부르기가 훨씬 편할 것 같고요. 이제 혹시 자막이 필요하신 분들은 밑에 CC 버튼을 누르셔서 자막을 활성화시키면 됩니다.
I think many of you are joining us last minute, so I think we can begin around 9:05-ish. So yeah, within a minute. Thank you all for patiently waiting. And as our translator was saying, it'd be great if you can change your Korean names if it's still in Korean to English, and if feel free to turn the caption on to follow through the session in Korean as well.
Everybody else who has been with us throughout, you will be sent to the same regard.
Also, it'd be great if you could mute yourselves at the moment. Yes, thank you. Alice, would you like to translate what Heather wrote in the chat, please?
네, 여러분 안녕하세요. 오늘 여러분과 함께하게 돼서 정말 영광입니다. 오늘 제가 강의를 진행하는 동안 질문이 있다면 채팅 박스에 남겨주셔도 되고 혹은 이제 강의가 끝난 후에 물어봐 주셔도 되는데요. 한국어로 편하게 말씀하셔도 되고 아니면 영어가 편하신 분들은 영어로 질문해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
All right, I think we can get started now. Thank you all for joining us today on this lovely Saturday evening and for patiently waiting. Today, my name is Bethany. I will be leading the session today along with Heather, our beloved guest today. I'm sure you all came with great passion to learn about the future of education and how innovative our education is going to be with the blended learning system. So our beloved guest today, Heather Stake. Heather is the co-author of the well-known Amazon bestseller, Blended: Using Disruptive Innovation to Improve Schools, which I assume all of you have read in advance today, as well as a researcher who spent over 15 years studying the role of innovation and the blended learning model in education. And yeah, she's also the founder of Ready to Blend, leading a team of over 150 facilitators around the world who are certified to offer blended learning education and workshops to teachers. So for today's session, first of all, Heather will be running a short lecture with us to teach us what blended learning really is. And as our translator was saying, feel free to leave turn the caption on if you would like to be offered Korean translation. And also feel free to leave any questions in the chat. It can be either in Korean or in English. And we can have a time after the lecture to go over them one by one. And also after the lecture, you can also raise your hand to ask any questions you have at the moment. So yeah, I think it's time, so we can begin. Without further ado, let's bring Heather to the stage. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Bethany. Thank you for that warm introduction. It's so great to be with you today. I live in Austin, Texas, so I am across the world from you, but my husband lived in Korea for 2 years, and so I feel somewhat connected to you that way. And I have 5 children. So my youngest is 9 years old and my oldest is 18 years old. And so as a parent, I can speak to you as well about my perspective on schools. I will try to speak slowly enough that there is time for the translation. Please tell me if I should go slower. I want to make sure that we communicate well today. So my name is Heather Staker, and I have been studying innovation in education for 15 years. I started this journey as a student at Harvard Business School, where Clayton Christensen was my professor. And he is the father of innovation theory. And so he taught me so much about innovation. And I ended up working for him and thinking about how can we innovate more successfully in our schools? What can we do as a society to have more successful schools? Let me share some pictures with you and we will talk through some of our discoveries. Okay. There. Are you seeing that correctly, Bethany?
Yes, awesome.
Okay, perfect. Unfortunately, I do not have an image of my book in Korean. I know it's on the market. Bethany, do you know what the title, can you say the title of it in Korean? Do you know what it is? Maybe you can find it online while I'm talking.
Yeah, I think it's literally just blended. I think you just read it out, but I'll make sure to leave it in chat.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you can find the link to what the Korean version looks like, because I couldn't find it, but I'm sure you can. So we wrote this book a few years ago to compile, to put together all of our research on how schools are changing, and online learning is changing the way that the world learns. Around the world, we are seeing big changes in how our schools work, and this impacts our children. The idea that the book begins with is that schools were not built for learning. That might sound like a surprising claim, but I believe that schools were not built specifically for learning. Schools were built to to standardize so that many students could go through the system. Before we had our school system, students learned either at home or in small schoolhouses, but we were not able to get the whole population through the school system. But then with the rise of factories, we invented new ways to be efficient. And we borrowed those same ideas and used them to design schools. And so our schools are somewhat like a factory where they are built for standardization. They are built to get many people through the system in a batch, in a set, through the system together. So one aspect of that is that in a school, the time is set, the time is fixed. And then whether or not students learn, that is variable. That is what changes. So for example, students attend school and the teacher delivers a lecture. And then there's a test. And then the students move to the next topic or subject. And only later do they get their results. And studies show that this is very unmotivating, that when you get your results, when it's too late to change them, it's unmotivating. So often our students go to school and they don't get their results until after they've already moved on to the next topic. And so they can't change their results. We also know that that system is not healthy for our children because different students have different needs at different times. As a parent, I know that each of my children learns differently. Some of them are like a rabbit when it comes to math. Some of them are more like a turtle, slow and steady. They have different amounts of working memory. Some are very good at storing facts. Some are good at conceptualization. Different children have different minds and different ways of learning. Some have long-term memory in different ways than others. So we see all of these differences in our students, but our schools are built to standardize the same thing for the same student at the same time. This is why I say that schools were not built to optimize for learning. They were not built to accommodate all of these different types of brains and personalities. And apart from that, some children just feel better on certain days than others. I have a student who wakes up in the morning and he is ready for school. He eats a big breakfast and he shoots out the door. He is energized. I have a daughter who wakes up and she is not a morning person. And she struggles to get to school and to feel good enough to survive. And so even their personalities and their physical selves are different and need different things. What this results in is the Swiss cheese problem in education. Do you eat Swiss cheese, Bethany? Is that something that's common on your menu?
Not super common in Korea, but I'm sure we all kind of know it
Okay.
to some degree.
I do not like the flavor, but it's a common analogy because Swiss cheese is famous for having holes in it. And what we see with our children is that when you have one system that is standardized for all children, it creates holes in our students' learning. So that my daughter, on a day when she's too tired or doesn't feel well to go to school, she will get a hole in her math class that day. Something won't stick. For the student that's more like a turtle instead of a rabbit, they will experience a hole if the teacher is going too fast. For a student with great long-term memory and who learns like a rabbit, school could be boring and they tune out or they fall asleep. They will get a hole. And in the end, these students are failing to learn. Each hole represents a way that the student is not learning the information for the day. And day by day, over time, eventually they develop big gaps in their understanding. So what schools are discovering is that there is a better way to design our schools. And we call this competency learning or mastery learning. Learning based on mastering the information, based on developing competency or mastery before moving on to the next lesson. So what does this look like? In a competency system, the school offers learning experiences to students, and then they are tested to see what they learned. And then the students receive feedback and results and interaction to help them if they have any holes in their learning. And then the student goes back and learns again until every single hole is filled in their learning. And then they move on to the next material. So in a mastery system or competency system, students progress after they have closed every hole in their Swiss cheese brain. If you have any questions about this idea, please type them in the chat. This idea of competency learning or mastery learning is important. It's foundational to how schools are changing right now. Also, research has shown again and again that there is tremendous power in a tutor. I know that in the Korean system, you have learned this better than in the United States, and many students have tutors that they go to. And there's power in that. There's a reason why you are successful with your tutoring system. And it's because students benefit when there is a tutor who helps them close those holes in their brain, who helps them move forward as they are ready. But the problem is giving every student in this world a tutor is very expensive. And so schools can't do it. And so what we see is more of a factory where all of the students move in batches through the system together. And as a result, Swiss cheese. These explanations help us understand why more and more schools are doing online learning. Now, I wrote my book before COVID-19. In a world with COVID-19, many students around the world are doing online learning. But I wrote this book in 2015, before COVID-19. And we, at that time, still predicted that online learning would get more and more popular around the world. We didn't know that it would become so common by 2021. But the reason we thought that online learning was going to get more and more popular was that more schools would find that they needed a way for students to move forward as they mastered the content, as they became competent with the content. And more schools would want individual tutoring. And online learning can give us these benefits. Online learning allows students to learn to move forward as they become masters of the content. And it also allows students to work individually online while the teacher gives individual and small group tutoring. One observation that we made in about 2010 was that online learning was starting to blend into brick and mortar schooling. At first, online learning was mostly something that you saw as remote learning. Mostly students were doing online learning from home or from the coffee shop. But little by little, online learning started to blend into brick and mortar schools. So a student who was enrolled in a brick and mortar school would also be doing online learning. The definition of blended learning is a formal education program where a student learns at least in part through online learning and at least in part in a brick and mortar school. And then the third part of the definition is that the activities that the student is doing are connected. So that if a student is learning online at home and then they come to school, the teacher knows what the student did at home and builds off of that. The teacher doesn't just repeat it or ignore it, but the teacher looks at data and is able to build off of where the student is in his learning. And so there's a partnership between the data and the teacher so that the student is getting the right lesson at the right time in the right way for each student. Let me say that again. The idea with blended learning is that each student gets the right lesson at the right time in the right way for them. That's very different from the factory system. Blended learning is not the same thing as technology-rich instruction. You might see your children's classroom and see a smartboard, an electronic whiteboard. You might even see that every student has their own computer, but it still is not blended learning in many schools. Many schools are using computers simply to replace a pencil and paper. And so you still see a teacher at the front of the room delivering a lecture. You still see the students taking notes. This is still a factory system. This is still learning as a factory where the students are all moving at the same time through the same thing. In a true blended classroom, each student is getting the right lesson at the right time for them. And so this teacher is no longer delivering one lecture to all students at the same time while the students are asleep at their desk. Instead, the students are accessing their lectures on their computers, and so they can move at their own pace. They have a variety of options for which lesson to watch. They have a variety of ways to interact with the content. And the teacher is available for individual tutoring, for meeting with individual students to see how they're doing. Are they hungry? Are they sick? Do they need extra love? Do they need extra support? Do they need the teacher to explain a concept in a new way? The teacher has time for those things. In some blended models, you see a rotation. It's called a station rotation in English. And in a station rotation, the teacher does some instruction with one group, while one group is doing collaborative activities and one group is doing online learning. And then maybe every 20 minutes or every 15 minutes, the students rotate to a new station. In other schools, students do a flexible model. In a flexible model, the students are learning online and then the teacher meets with them as necessary. It's very flexible. It's not every 20 minutes the students rotate. It's whenever the students need help, then they get help. Parents, I have some ideas for you. I want to talk to you specifically. I hope that overview gave you just a way of looking at your students' schools, some things to hope for in our system, some hope that our schools will become more competency or mastery based, some hope that our students will have more opportunities to access their lessons online and to have great teachers who support them individually. I hope that our students will be able to access teachers or to have classrooms where the teacher meets with them individually and gives them individual feedback and coaching every single day. It would change this world if more students had that kind of place. And as we look for great teachers in the future, the best teachers will be the teachers who are the most able to love and support and coach each student as the student does their own learning using the technology that's available today. Parents, how can we support our students? One important consideration is to help our students have a balanced digital diet. We all know about food diets and the idea of eating the right foods to help our bodies feel good. Our children and we as adults also need to use technology in a way that helps our hearts feel good so that we are most able to learn. So I'm talking about phones, I'm talking about laptops, I'm talking about tablets, all of these types of computers. It's important to have a balanced digital diet. So let's look here, the use lightly. What should we only eat a little bit of? Social media, news, shows, and games. What should we eat abundantly? Communication tools that help us connect with each other. Life management tools, so banking, managing our health, planning our travel, planning our goals. Learning tools, so tools that help us learn a new language, tools that help us practice math or reading. Work and creativity tools, so tools that help us listen to beautiful music or take photos or share files. We can teach our children to use these tools abundantly. They can help them in their lives. Meanwhile, we need to teach our children to use social media, the news, games, and shows lightly. Use them sparingly. Use them small. Most importantly, we have some things that make us unhappy, and we should eliminate them altogether. In my mind, this is like eating poison. What is the poison in the digital world? One is unreliable sources. So teach your children to identify things online that are not true and do not trust them. Second, keep away from not guarding private information and passwords. Teach your children to keep their passwords private, to keep their personal location private, to keep their personal information private. Third, keep away from harming your personal reputation. Keep away from saying or posting anything online that could hurt your reputation. It's very hard to erase what you post online. Children need to know that the things that they post now when they are 7, 8, 9 years old will still be there in 50 years. And they need to learn to use caution with what they post and represent their best selves with the things that they post online. Fourth, keep away from anything that bullies or humiliates anyone. That doesn't need an explanation. Anything that bullies or humiliates anyone. Fifth, keep away from pornography and violence. Many children do not know that the internet can make their lives more difficult. They need to learn, and their parents can teach them that the internet is a place that has beautiful things and also things that will make their life more painful and difficult. Keep away from pornography and violence. Keep away from plagiarism and theft. There are many ways to steal online. Children need to be taught not to do that. And then finally, keep away from using your computer in a way that prevents you from being in person with your people and your pets. So it's more important to spend time in real life with your people and your pets than to be on the device. I talk about this in my Ready to Blend podcast, episode 24. It's called Hacks for Social Belonging. So as parents, this is the most important thing you can do to support your children. Our children are using computers more and more in their schools. And with the pandemic, they are using computers more and more. As parents, it is unrealistic to think that we can just throw away all computers and return to 200 years ago. We are not returning to a world with horses and buggies. We are not returning to a world where we only farm. Our world is going to continue to have technology and innovation. So as parents, it is especially important to teach our children to avoid the poison, to eat the junk food sparingly, to go light on the junk food, and then to eat the healthy food abundantly. The last thing I want to share with you, and the reason that Lisa reached out to me, is that this is my darling husband, Alan, and he and I started a company called Brain Chase, where we try to give students the healthiest food online. And so we organize treasure hunts where students learn online and then they get clues to discover treasures. And so this is an example of the dashboard. And I know that Lisa's group with Heyikido is working with Brain Chase to organize some treasure hunts and escape rooms that give students the opportunity to learn online and to discover the best apps and learning opportunities online that will feel good to their brains. And so I wanted to tell you that Brain Chase is available, and Heyikido can tell you more about that. So takeaways from today. Factory classrooms were not designed for learning. Online learning provides the opportunity to make learning more personal. Online learning is blending with brick and mortar schooling. You will see new models in your schools, like station rotation and flex. Give your children a balanced digital diet. Some resources for you. My book, Blended, Using Disruptive Innovation to Improve Schools. The Ready to Blend podcast. I also post free classes on readytoblend.com that you can watch at any time. They're on YouTube. And then Brain Chase, which creates online learning games and challenges for children. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. So now I'm hoping that we can answer any questions and have a discussion. let's see if there's any questions in the chat. You can type your question in the chat, or let me just stop my screen share. And if anyone wants to ask a question, then please feel free to unmute and ask your question, and Alice will translate for me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Alice, would you like to go ahead?
Sorry. 네, 여러분, 이제 강의는 끝났고 질문을 받아볼까 하는데요. 혹시 질문을 육성으로 말씀하셔도 되고 또 채팅방에 남겨주셔도 되는데, 네, 방금 수연님이 채팅창에 긴 질문 남겨주셨는데 이것부터 시작을 할게요. 다른 분들은 채팅방에 질문 남겨주셔도 되고 또 이 질문이 끝나면 직접 말씀하셔도 돼요. Okay, so we have a question from Suyeon. So, hello, I have a 6-year-old. Thank you for your lovely lecture about blended. I do really hope that my children is less rebelled to the media, and I'm trying to limit their use of digital and medias. However, I can see that for blended education, media and digitalization cannot be limited. When do you think is the best time for children to be exposed to the digitalized world or such medias that you explained? And how old do you think would it be the best to start blended education?
Great question. As a parent, sometimes I wish that we could just completely get rid of computers because they're so addictive to our children. And so it's hard as a parent, and I fight this war every single day in my own home, is how to manage the technology so that my children have a way to do their homework, access their online lessons, and and the tools that they use online, but not sacrifice their real people and their pets and their real in-person life. One recommendation I have for you is to collect your devices at nighttime. Research shows that this is a great way to limit device use. So at our home every night, we collect all phones, all computers, and everything goes to sleep. There's no more device use late at night. It's not healthy for our children to sleep with their devices. For schools, at the age of 6 or 7 years old, teachers should only be using devices for a few minutes at a time. So the teacher would perhaps present the start of a lesson and then challenge the students to do 10 minutes of online learning to master that content. And then the students would go back to in-person learning. Very brief, very brief. As they get older, the students can do longer sessions of individual online learning, but it should be age appropriate. So younger children, very brief sessions to help them master a skill, and then turn off the device and be in person, touch objects, work together, talk to each other. As students get older, they can do more. But at home, set limits. Your children will hate you. It will have to be something that you require as a family. But in the end, you are helping them be happier. The key is to help them have a balanced digital diet. I will put the link to that image in the chat in case you want to share it with your oh, I just lost my screen. Just a minute. There we go. I'll find it in just a second, but I will put the link to that image in the chat in case you want to use it to teach your children and to help them discern between junk food, poison, and healthy food online. Thank you for that question. What else do we have?
I'm sorry, I would just briefly translate what you just said in Korean.
Oh, you didn't. Oh, I thought you were typing that.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I thought. Sorry, I was just trying to verbally answer those questions, but since I will be typing your answers from the next one. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Do you want me to? Can you remember all of that?
Yeah, I took notes. 네, 방금 우리 작가님이 간단하게 말씀을 해주셨는데요. 일단 저희 수연님이 올려진 것처럼 6살에서 7살 어린아이들은 아직 그런 기기에 대한 사용을 제한하는 게 맞다고 말씀을 해주셨어요. 이제 작가님도 어머니다 보니까 이제 컴퓨터를 다 없애고 싶은 마음에 동의를 하시는데, 일단 작가님이 추천하시는 방법은 밤에는 무조건 컴퓨터와 폰을 걷는 걸 추천을 드린대요. 작가님도 그런 방법을 실천하고 계시고, 그리고 6세 정도에 되는 아이들은 보통 선생님만 그런 디지털 기기에 대한 노출이 있고 이제 제한적인 시간을 주고 그걸 사용할 수 있는 환경을 만드는 게 최고라고 말씀을 해주셨어요. 하지만 그건 이제 학습 환경에서의 말이고, 집에서는 이제 부모님들이 집에서 할 수 있는 것들은 제한 시간을 두고 또 아이들이 최대한 디지털 기기를 오용하지 않도록 도와주는 건데요. 네, 강조하신 점은 이제 어머니가 최대한 노출이 안 될 수 있도록 6세 아이들에 한해서는 네, 그렇다고 말씀을 해주셨어요. 선생님이 지금 채팅창에 어떤 링크를 보내주셨는데요. 그 링크는 아이들이 이제 기기를 왜 쓰지 말아야 하는지에 대해서 어머니, 아버지들이 설명을 해주실 때 좋은 링크인 것 같습니다. 네, 다음 질문부터는 제가 그냥 자막으로 남길게요. 다음 질문 해주세요. 육성으로 말씀하셔도 되고 이제 채팅창에 남겨주셔도 됩니다. 질문 있으신 분들은 편하게 질문해 주세요.
Maybe while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, I think I also have a question from your presentation today. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. I even got to learn, I'm not even a parent, but I was just so inspired and I learned a lot as well. But just like referring back to the balanced diet, digital diet diagram you were showing, I was just wondering why news was included in the, like one of the things we should make children like use less.
Sure. Let me share that again so we are all talking about the same thing. Okay. So Bethany's question was why? Let's see if it'll come up. There we go. So she said, why did I say news should use lightly? And the reason for that is that there are the news likes to, news channels get more traffic when they share stories that are exciting and curious and maybe even disturbing. And what we find and the research shows is that there's more negative news than positive. And over time, experiencing a lot of negative news can increase anxiety. And many of the problems that we see on the news are beyond our control, particularly for children. And so when we're thinking about the social and emotional health of our children, protecting their hearts so that they can be happy and successful adults, we want to encourage them to limit their news. They can stay in touch with some positive news sources, but it's not healthy for them to have the news on all of the time or to engage with the news so much that it starts to increase their anxiety levels. They should be focusing on the things that are in their control and how to help improve their community locally, how to serve their families, how to serve their local community, instead of worrying about world issues that are beyond their control at this point. I think the same is true for parents, quite honestly, that we can become so worried about the world news that we neglect our own local families and communities and the changes that we can make that are positive within our own control. So it's a lot of this is just being mindful about the technology. I like to think of school buses. Sometimes we send our children on a school bus to go to a museum or to go on a trip. And if they go on that school bus, we know where they're going. We know how long they will be there. We know who they are with. But when we give them a device, we are sending them on a virtual trip. And as parents, we should still know, where are they going? Who will they be with? How long will they be there? Managing these things is critical this day. It's a new problem. We've never had this problem before in this world. But as parents in 2021, it's something that's very critical to manage. It's tiring, but it's important.
Yeah, thank you. That makes so much sense. I also find myself like spending too much time into things that maybe I shouldn't be spending that much time on, and worrying about a lot of things from the negativity, I guess. If you have more questions, feel free to leave them in chat. Any like parents or guests that joined us today, you can also raise your hand or verbalize them. Yes, we have another question. Alice, could you verbally translate the question to Heather, please?
Sure. So so this is a question from Shinjung. I completely agree with you that the online classes has been increased due to Corona, but however, there are a lot of negative cases of online classes. For example, there has been a drama. There has been a hit drama called Squid Game, and those violent scenes has been the kids could see those violent scenes through online. And so what do you think is the right proportion of online classes and offline classes for kids to be protected from such violence and inappropriate medias?
Great, thank you. So violence like from Squid Game is an example of, can you see my my cursor? I'm not sure if you can see it on the screen, but here, I think I can.
Yes, we can. Mhm.
Oh, you can, okay, perfect. So right here is an example of this pornography and violence category that we want to absolutely keep away from. And so teaching our children that there is no place for this in their lives, that it will only make their lives harder and more miserable. Parents know this. Children do not know this yet. And so children can't be expected to police themselves. We need to help protect them. It's our job as parents to protect them from that type of violence. So in schools, when we talk about blended learning, in the best schools, students are doing some of their learning online, but that does not mean that there is no teacher. The teacher has an even more important role. The teacher's role is to meet individually with each student and give them feedback and help them. The teacher's role is to bring the class together, to work on a project together, or to have a discussion, or to apply the lesson in a way that connects it to the real world. So when I say online learning, I don't mean students by themselves with a computer for hours and hours. I mean short doses of online learning mixed with many, many offline experiences that deepen the learning, that make the learning more collaborative, that make the learning more personal for each student. In the best schools, that's what's happening. Now, the reality, many of our schools are doing too much online learning right now. Partly that's because of COVID, and we just have to wait and be patient, because we will go back to more balance. We will go back to more balance. But as we do, parents can advocate for schools that blend online learning into offline learning in healthy ways. And so I'm glad you're with me today and you are being informed so that you are a better consumer. You will know that in the best schools, there's a good balance of online learning and then high quality offline learning with connection, with humanity, with that teacher loving and encouraging and supporting each student. That's what we want going forward. We'll figure it out, but innovation takes time, and we will have some missteps along the way, but we will figure it out. We will have more and more schools that really create great blends of online and offline learning, and they will be better than the factory schools that we had in the past. But it will take time and resource and really smart parents who help guide our children away from the violence, away from the poison, and toward the light, toward the types of resources online that will help our children have happier, more successful relationships and lives.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I guess innovation takes some time, so we'll see how it goes. I hope it's going on to like a positive direction. And yeah, while you were responding, we have one more question. Thank you so much, Alice, for like translating it in the captions. Could you also verbally translate our question in chat now?
Sure. Okay, so we have a question from Heikido. How do you see the future of OutSchool and online education platforms?
Great question. There are many platforms emerging right now that allow children to learn outside of school. The future of those platforms depends on school policies. So in some countries, there are policies that allow students to get credit for working from home, from completing lessons outside of school. In other countries, it's more strict. You have to do the state mandated curriculum and take the state mandated assessments. So these alternative forms of K-12 schooling vary from country to country. And in the United States, they vary from state to state. Each state has different policies for what is allowed. As our children become adults, I predict that these alternative forms of education will become a bigger and bigger factor in their lives. Employees are changing jobs more often now than in the past. There's more change, there's more turnover in the workforce. And so the world requires lifelong learners. The world requires students who are able to continue to learn and get new skills throughout their entire lives. And so the online courses and platforms that enable lifelong learning are becoming more and more important in our economy. Even Bethany is attending, about to graduate from a university that is very innovative around allowing the students to explore the world individually. And we will see more and more innovative higher education options for students that give them more options, more specific career training, more ways for them to explore the world without just thinking that there's only one university that they can attend or their life is ruined. That is not the future. The future is many options and the need to keep learning throughout our entire lives because of the economy. That was an interesting question, and there are so many of these type of tools now. I'll circle it, like these learning tools that families can take advantage of.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heather. I'll leave in chat like the name of my school, I guess, just to provide some more context for whoever is interested. And yeah, thank you. We have one more question. If Alice is ready, can you please verbalize the translation for us?
Okay. Sorry. So after Corona, I heard that even in America, there has been a strict increase in online classes in American schools. Also, so my question is, are the classes one way? Are the classes done in one way, as in a teacher tells the lecture, student take notes, or is it done while communicating with the students in class? Like, I think what the questioner is trying to say is the lecturer leaving videos only, or are they communicating through Zoom or like live classes? Which class has higher proportion? And also, sorry, how do teachers help students concentrate more on online classes?
Okay. Good question. So let me show you. So your question began with the idea that after COVID, more students are learning online in the United States. I think what we see in the United States is the opposite, that many students have been unhappy learning online, and many families are desperate to go back to in-person schooling, and they don't want to ever do online learning again. So politically, that seems to be the common feeling in the United States is, we don't want to ever do online learning again. We do not want any more pandemics. Let's put this all behind us and never do that again. What I think will happen over time is that we will find a blend where we can marry the best aspects of online learning with the best aspects of in-person learning. So let me show you what that could look like. One type of blended learning that I love is called a blended learning arc. And the reason it's called an arc is because it's like a rocket. The students take off together and then they continue their journey, their mission. Are you seeing this rocket right now? Am I sharing my screen, Bethany?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. And then they end their mission together. So what is the student doing during a blended learning arc? They begin with group discussion. This is in person, or if there's a pandemic and they have to be remote, then this is on Zoom. But it's everyone together, connecting, being human, being friends, supporting each other. And then they are launched into their independent work. This is what they're doing online. This is the independent work that they're doing online so that they can move at their own pace, so they can have the right lesson at the right time in the right way for them. Then they are doing collaborative work, no computers, or computers just as tools, and they are building, they are creating real world solutions. And then they close, they end with another group discussion to reflect on how it went. What is the teacher doing during this time? Well, the teacher is part of the group discussion, but then the teacher uses the rest of the learning time for one-on-one check-ins, where they're meeting individually, tutoring, giving feedback, giving love, giving coaching, and then they end with another group discussion. This is only one example of what schools might look like in the future. But if you look at this example, you'll see that computers are only one little part of it. There's a lot of other things that are happening to create a happy, successful work environment for that student and that teacher.
Okay, thank you. I think we have one more question. Maybe Alice, would it be okay if I translate? Because I think you're still typing in the translation.
That'd be nice, thank you.
Okay, so yes, we have one more question from Heyikido. As we are going through the pandemic, there are an increasing number of MOOC platforms like Coursera or Udemy that's kind of like affecting the college level education environment. But do you see that also happening to perhaps like K-12 education systems? For example, do you expect there to be kindergartens or elementary, middle school, or high schools like Minerva University?
The MOOC courses like Coursera, they offer a full course in a topic. The main place that we're seeing that in the K-12 system is for secondary education, when a student cannot access a course that they need. So suppose that your student wants to take a course in Arabic or Portuguese, and your school does not have a Portuguese teacher or an Arabic teacher. Many schools are saying you can take an online Arabic course so that you can still learn Arabic while you continue to attend our brick and mortar school. That is the main way that we expect those full online courses to continue in the future. For primary school students, they are not as common. There are two areas where they're more common in primary education. One is for foreign languages, and the second is for after-school care. Some after-school facilities offer those online courses after school, so that if a student wants to do like an out-school course, they can do it after school. But other than that, at the primary school level, we do not see a lot of students doing a full online course. But at the secondary school level, they are helpful when a student wants to take a course that is not available or that they cannot fit into their schedule. I do think that more students will do schools like Minerva University. Not every school will be as good as Minerva University, but we will see more and more innovation at the higher education level, partly because our economy depends on lifelong learners. And there have to be changes in our system so that adults can continue to learn and reskill. They can continue to upskill and reskill for their entire careers because the world is changing so quickly.
I see. Yeah, thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense, and we could learn a lot more from all of your great responses. We don't have any more questions at the moment, and I think if there are no more questions, yes, we can start wrapping up. Thank you so much for your lecture and your great responses again. And also thank you for the audience for joining us on a Saturday night. I'm sure everyone here was as inspired and learned a lot, just like I did through today's session. And yeah, I think we can call it a day. Thank you so much for your work as well, and we wish you all the best in the future. And thank you, parents, for joining us. And all right, then have a great evening, everyone. Would you like to say a few more words before we leave, Heather?
I'll just thank you for joining me tonight. It was really a pleasure. You asked very intelligent questions, and Bethany and Alice, you were fantastic. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.